Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today. My name is Chelsea Perino. I'm Managing Director of Global Marketing and Communications at the Executive Center, and I'm really excited to have this conversation with two people that I really respect, and I'm super interested to hear all the insights from. This podcast is on behalf of the Urban Land Institute, and we're going to be talking about a topic that I think is on top of everyone's minds, ESG, and we have some really different and interesting perspectives to share. So the topic today is ESG past, present, and future. And myself and my friends here from Lendlease, we're going to be talking about what does ESG really mean in the current property landscape. Obviously, we all are involved in the property industry in different ways, and look at some of the misconceptions about what a successful ESG strategy is. Talking about everything from mission zero to the impact of social value and the role that that plays in guiding development and design, and also kind of trying to debunk some of the myths about ESG data. I think that's one of the big topics today is how do we measure all of the projects and all these initiatives that we're putting a lot of effort into. And what are some of the challenges and assumptions that we've encountered in our experiences? But then I think most importantly, what are the opportunities and where do we see the future of ESG kind of headed? So I would love to pass the mic over to my guests that are joining us here to introduce themselves. Please. Natalie,
I'm Natalie. Yeah, I'll go straight there in there. Forgive the overlap, but I'm Natalie Slessor. I'm head of product strategy for Lendlease Investment Management. I have a specialisation in the future of work and the future of life in our cities. So I'm really interested in how demographics are driving what we do and why we do it. I'm interested in the future of work. Never such a big topic as after the pandemic, when it's just become everybody's specialist subject, and quite rightly too. So I'm really pleased to be here. Thanks, Chelsea. Over to you, Anne.
Yes, hi, I'm Anne Austin. I'm the Head of Sustainability here at Lendlease in Australia. And one of the things that interests me is that this overlap between ESG and sustainability. I'm really pleased to have this conversation because the two terms are often used synonymously and they are different. But the ESG agenda is something that, generally gets led from within my team, certain aspects of it. And so it's good to be airing some of the myths and misconceptions around the three letters.
For sure. So to put a little bit of context as to why we're all kind of in the same virtual room together, the Executive Center is really excited to have worked with Lendlease in several different locations, but we're opening one of our newest offices in Sydney in the amazing Salesforce Tower, and really have spent a lot of time learning from the Lendlease team about all of the sustainability efforts that went into that development. So excited to kind of extend that conversation and focus it a little bit more. And you had the perfect segue, because I think we talked about starting sort of big picture and talking about what does ESG actually mean. And I think that the point you made between sustainability and ESG is a bit murky. So maybe you can expand on the difference between those two terms.
Sure. I've noticed a lot of people using the two terms interchangeably and, one breath talking ESG, one breath talking sustainability, and they do have overlap, but they are a little different. ESG, environmental social governance, is a specific tool and a way of thinking that has been set up to support people understanding whether their investments that they're making are not only performing well financially, but have really solid platforms around their environmental and social performance and their governance in relation to how they're managing their environmental and social performance. And they tend to draw on there for a whole range of different topics. So there's the environmental side, which is energy, water, waste, etc. The social side, though, tends to be more things that fall often outside of a sustainability remit and more in a corporate remit. Things like diversity, inclusion, modern slavery, human rights, policies around having, whistleblowers, etc. That's often what people are looking for. They're just looking for good management practices when it comes to recognising our humanness and our human needs. And then the governance piece is typically related to how well the organisation is governing those two things. So are they Are people incentivized through KPIs and targets and their bonuses, etc.? Are there structures set up in place for various people to sign things off, etc.? So if you've got a sustainability hat on, you're probably looking very deeply into the environmental space and probably into things like social impact, workforce participation, stakeholder engagement, etc. But if you're in the ESG space, your hat is a little bit broader than that. And that's something that perhaps sometimes people don't always follow. And certainly I hear even in my own organisation, those two things being interchangeably used. We, for example, at Lendlease have actually set up an ESG committee at our group level that's been working on an ESG data book that we make available to investors. And that committee has people from our legal team, people from our people and culture team, people from our sustainability team, because it's all of these functions that apply to that type of work.
That's a really interesting point. And I think we actually talked about that, Natalie, you and I, when we put together the video series. So everybody who's listening to the podcast, go watch our videos. They're really, really awesome. And they dig deep into sort of the other side of that. But this idea of partnership and how it's not just one vertical within a company's responsibility to think about these kinds of issues, kind of needs to be ingrained in sort of the fundamental ethos of a company and the building of the business strategy in order to really have the true impact. And I know that Lendlease has a really impressive and aggressive ESG initiative, specifically talking about the E vertical.
Yeah.
So maybe, Natalie, you could talk about the Mission Zero and what you guys are doing to kind of achieve that agenda.
Yes, I will quickly throw to Anne Austin, who is a huge part of authoring it too. But I have to say that I'm really proud that our targets are aggressive and meaningful and impactful. We at Lendlease have always wanted to be standard setters. Mission Zero is doing what it says on the tin. It's not hieroglyphics, and that's really important to our customers and our investment partners, that we've set that target. It does what we want it to do, and that is to achieve zero by, and I will defer to Anne, and absolute zero by 2040. So at the end of the day, there's just no wriggle room. And I think transparency is a really big part of standard setting, but I'm going to let the technical expert ensure that I don't get these terms
You've
wrong.
done very well. You've done very well. Yeah. So our Mission Zero journey is part of Lendlease's commitment to being a 1.5 degree aligned company. So we've been mapping what do we need to do our part to try and keep global warming to 1.5 degrees, noting that will be lucky because we're already warmed by over 1 degree now, and part of that is the realization that by 2040 we really need to be a zero emissions organization. So we're going to be net zero by 2025, and absolute zero. That means like not using offsets, and for all of our emissions, our own emissions, so the fuels we use, Scope 1, our electricity, Scope 2, and all the things that we have an indirect interaction with, so our supply chain, the materials that we use, and that our tenants and their electricity, etc. And all of those things wrapped together as part of our Mission Zero journey. We've got roadmaps that detail the key steps that we're taking. It's all published on our website, so you can go in and Google search under Mission Zero and knock yourself out. And we're trying to publish as much as possible. I'm just about to release our 2-year-old birthday report. So we've been on the Mission Zero journey for 2 years now, and this month we'll be launching a microsite. So in March that'll be up. That gives case study stories and some freebies. So we're putting, when we've prepared a guide, we're going to share it, because the reality is, to get to 1.5 degrees, everybody needs to move. There is no room for a winner. There is no room for a leader. We all have to lead this and move in the same direction. And so if we've already established some traction in an area, we are going to share that in the hope that then that becomes normal for the rest of the industry.
I think that's so amazing. And one of the things that the Executive Center is doing in our journey, we aren't as evolved as you guys are, but we're absolutely thinking about that as we've committed to only moving into green buildings. So your point about, you can build a beautiful development, but if the tenants aren't on that same sort of mission and don't have the same vision, then it's really difficult for you guys as developers to achieve those goals. So it really needs to be this, like, everybody come together and let's move in that direction at the same time and at the same pace, and help each other to better our businesses at the same time. I think the flexible workspace is a really interesting piece of that story because it has a lot to do with shared resources. So we focus a lot on helping our clients understand, at what capacity do they need space and how much, and that relates to energy consumption, and that relates to the usability and how do you build the most efficient sort of spaces for people to work in. And I think that that's something that we're seeing in terms of trends, are people becoming more conscious about, how much space do we actually need and what do people want to use within the space. So how can we be really intuitive and really thoughtful and purposeful about how we're designing all of our spaces. And I'm hopeful that flexible workspaces can play a role in a lot of those sorts of stories moving forward. But I think that segues really well into the second point that we wanted to talk about, which is, the humanity of all of this, right? Because at the base level, it's all of us, it's people. We live on the planet and we're trying to make it better for all the future generations. And I know, Natalie, you talk a lot about the people piece of this. So you mentioned earlier, a lot of the drive for you guys is coming from customers. So can you explain a little bit more about the connection between, what your consumers are asking for and how that impacts the value proposition of Lendlease?
Yeah, as I said, the future of work is on everybody's lips in some way or other. Even if it's around the kitchen table, we're all talking about the way we work. And so we've been listening hard about what businesses want and what people want. And then what you were just saying, Chelsea, was so great. It's like our value proposition as a mission zero property company and yours as a flexible, right-sized, green-aligned provider of space is their proposition. If it can't be something the customers are also proud of, we shouldn't be doing it. So they should be able to take our mission zero and say, this is mine too, because I've chosen to be here. This is a supplier of my office space. They should be able to take your beautiful value proposition at the executive center and say, this is the kind of company we are. We back this, and this is the experience we want. So we've been listening to what businesses do want, what enables them to be more successful. There's no doubt that Generation Z are highly principled and purposeful, so they should be. They're arriving at a time where it's front of mind for all of us, but they're very much a very influential generation. They are probably 3 to 4 years into the workforce as we speak. So they're young, but they're here, and there's a lot of them, and they're highly influential. And we know that as digital, creative, problem-solving talent, they're going to be very valuable to most of our customers, which is critical to listen to what they really want and how do we land it, and be transparent, as I said before. If we can't do what Anna invited us to do and go and find mission zero, if we're not publishing it and doing our little anniversary review, where are we up to? Everybody will, but potentially Gen Z more than the others, our newest talent, they'll smell that a mile away. Hold on a minute, you said this and you said that. Very interestingly, in Australia this week, we have had a legal case brought against an investment platform for greenwashing. So this is real. There are implications for our customers and ourselves if we don't ground this. And so we take that incredibly seriously on a number of fronts.
I think that's so interesting. I had a conversation with some people yesterday also around we were talking about prioritization of goals from an ESG perspective. So it's a big ocean of things that we need to do out there. So how do you figure out what to do first? But transparency was such a big part of that conversation, and the recognizing that, very few organizations have it 100% right. And that's actually okay. It's the fact that you acknowledge, okay, look, there are a lot of things that we need to be doing. We're going to choose the things that are going to make the most impact for our business. And we're going to prioritize that. And we're going to acknowledge it's not perfect in these other areas. And we're going to create a roadmap, but maybe we're not touching those places right now. And that's actually okay. That's part of the larger sort of story. But I think one of the challenges that a lot of organizations face is, how do you track all of this? How do you measure the success? So Anne, I would love to know your thoughts on the measurability of all of these different kind of ESG initiatives that we're embarking on.
Yeah, this is a particular passion topic of mine. I've recently come into a different role in the Lendlease family, which has exposed me to the world of investment management and the agenda of ESG. And as such, you come in with sort of fresh eyes. And I've been looking at some of the tools and things that investors have relied upon for measuring ESG and determining what's considered to be holistically good in a real estate context. And those tools were set up many years ago to really raise the bar of the bottom, like to have just to lift the whole industry, to get them to start measuring their environmental performance and actually tracking gender diversity and those sorts of statistics. So they were really designed to just start the conversation, get us moving and thinking about these initiatives, and they were very, very successful. So this is tools like GRESB that many of you would be familiar with, the Global Real Estate Sustainability Benchmark. It's widely respected and used, now by many investors to try and pin what's good. But these tools are all now running at 100 miles an hour to catch up with the pace of change that's been happening in our sector, and our realization that we can't just lift the bottom, we have to push the top really fast. And the world, in particularly in terms of decarbonisation, has moved so quickly in the last few years. The kinds of conversations we're having now about stripping carbon out of building materials, moving our tenants onto renewable electricity, etc., have moved far quicker than we had ever thought, and the tools don't measure it effectively yet. And so the tools are kind of running behind, trying to find ways to continue to be accessible to the masses, but continue to push that leadership. And so we're in conversation with, the likes of GRESB, et cetera, to really try and push that, to make sure that it's easy for investors to make some kind of decision. But what I would really encourage investors to do, if they're listening to any of this, is get under the bonnet of the tools that you are relying on, understand what they're rewarding, and be sure that that aligns with what your portfolio is looking to prioritize. So if, for example, climate change matters to you as an investor, that you've got a particular passion to be investing in things that are taking climate action, check. Does that tool actually reward organizations taking climate action as a good score, good in your eyes? Because what we thought was good 2-3 years ago has shifted, and you might be surprised that your top ranking or your top 10 or your X stars doesn't actually get you what you're hoping or assuming it would.
I think that's a really interesting point, just the alignment of first the strategy, identifying the impact, but then also making sure that all the tools you're using to measure the success of that are actually measuring the things that you think about, right? And we talked in our prep call about the different kinds of measurement models, and I think we have a lot of work to do, particularly in the S piece of that, because so much of it is human orientated and feeling related and quite qualitative, right? So I think there's a lot of really amazing stuff happening in the E vertical about the carbon neutrality and putting carbon emissions at the forefront and figuring out what the impact is from that perspective. But the things that really directly impact, how do people feel, and what's the experience like in the environments is still have a lot of ways to go in that area, which is exciting. At least people are thinking about it, right?
It sort of reminds me of, forgive me, Chelsea, I'm gonna chip in here and break the cycle, but it reminds me a little bit of the workplace measures that we also take. It's sort of, in some cases, the most important things are the hardest things to measure. So it's the in between. You're measuring A, but actually the unintended consequence is a B. So we measure, or historically in our sector, we've measured occupancy a lot. How many people are in at any given time, rather than whether they're having a good time, whether it's doing what they need it to do, whether they've been told to be there, whether they've chosen to be there, whether they feel good, etc. So it's a little bit like that. Where are the things? Again, it's not going to answer the question so much, but isn't it true that some of the most important things are very difficult to measure, and they fall between the cracks of these traditional measures? And then if you're measuring something, what are you doing about it? I mean, data is just a source of inspiration for action, and it's got to be then taken. So, we might be measuring it, and we might not be the worst in the pack, but are we doing anything about climbing out that ladder? And the same again for workplace. Are we measuring occupancy? Are we doing anything about it? Do we know what success looks like? Forgive me getting my 10
No, I mean that's I'm going to steal one of your lines here, the earning the commute thing, because I think that's such a valid point, especially over the last 3 years. We've all experienced some element of work from home, work from somewhere else, hybrid models, all these things. And that's, I think, the future is going to be some type of mix of all of these different kinds of environments. And obviously we're in the office space, so the office is here to stay for sure. And I think a lot of people, even very early into the whole work from home allure, where people were like, oh my God, finally work from home. This is going to be amazing. And then they had to work from home for 6 weeks and they were like, hang on a second. Like, I forgot about my kids, my dog, my neighbors, construction, the fact that I don't have a comfortable office chair, the fact that my Wi-Fi isn't supportive of all of these multiple things I need to do at the same time, right? And perhaps the grass isn't necessarily greener on the other side. But what I'm really excited about, and I think one of the silver linings of what we've all experienced, is the fact that organizations, developers, flexible workspace providers like ourselves are really starting to think about, how do we earn that commute? Because there are other places that people can work now, right? So we really need to make the reason to come into the office something that is meaningful. It's not just that occupancy stat that tells us whether we're being successful, right?
And therefore, is the measure going to change rather than cost per square meter, or experience per square meter, or impact per square meter? I wonder, to bring this back to ESG as well, wonder if there's a sustainability of hybrid measure that's been done, where you can actually, I'm sure it exists, so that the world listening out there might be shouting at their phone or the radio at the moment, but where you're able to put in your work style and actually work out the most sustainable way of working for yourself, your team, or even your whole organization. I think there's a needle to be thread there potentially.
I mean, you literally just said experience per square meter and my mind exploded. I was like,
okay,
what?
Okay, good.
Is this new?
Trademark.
I love it. Trademark it. It's amazing.
No. Do you know what? We had a campaign here at Barangaroo and they used a very similar. So I am riffing off some very intelligent colleagues of mine. I don't know if that was exact phraseology, but that was their concept.
I love it. It's so awesome. Well, I mean, that's the perfect way to sort of close our short but incredibly insightful conversation. So we talked about what does ESG mean versus sustainability and some of the different measurement tools and strategies, but what are you both most excited about for the future? What is ESG going to look like, in the next 6 to 12 months, 5 years, 10 years? Go for it.
I'm actually excited by the greenwashing police. I think that our focus on authenticity is really refreshing and so important. I'm really looking forward to there being some open collaboration and working together across and within industries to really tackle all things climate action related. And I think, somebody just reminding us to be true, to be actually acting as opposed to marketing is going to be really, really important, because we need all the energy that might otherwise be put into telling a story that's not true should be put into making the story true. So I'm looking forward to a generation that Natalie's talked about that's going to hold us to account. And I'm looking forward to people, actually realizing, what, this isn't about smoke and mirrors. This is real. This is really serious. We need to work together to ensure our future, and I'm feeling that shift. I'm feeling it. So it's good to see. We've got lots of collaborative groups popping up, like MECLA, the Materials Embodied Carbon Leaders Alliance, with unlikely people collaborating. So watch this space.
I love that. And I think Gen Z's very much going to hold us to account. Actually, when we talk to some of that generation, some of the things they say are very simple. And I hope some of these solutions are quite simple. They talk to us about cities in which they can always touch a piece of grass or see a tree or get a viewpoint. So I like the simple nature-based solutions that generation will also bring, as well as their brilliance in technology and creativity. And I can't wait to walk through many cities in the world which really feel much more connected to nature in a very simplistic way, as well as the technical side that Anne was covering. Very excited too, and very optimistic.
I agree with both of you, and I'm really excited that all of that is really individually and holistically focused, in that, I have a purpose, understanding what that means, being more intentful about the things that I do in all different walks of life, but then also having frameworks created by organizations like you guys, like Lendlease, like the Executive Center, that are really trying to make a difference, that I can also leverage and use the resources that are being provided that perhaps I wouldn't have at my remit if it was just me, and feeling like I'm part of a bigger story. And I think a lot of people are really excited about that too. And that's what's going to make the change, right? If every person does a little piece, and the organizations globally are also doing their piece, then we really start to create movement. So thank you both so much. It was short, but so insightful, and I really appreciate your time, and I learned so much, like I always do, speaking to you guys. So thank you very much, and speak to you soon.
Thanks for having
Chelsea.
us.
Great.
Thanks for having us.
Perfect.